Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the marketplace. Coming up this afternoon, government borrows 2 billion cedis in fresh funds for recurrent expenditure, increasing debt stock further. We'll find out the implications. Also coming up this afternoon, Cabinet starts discussions on how to deal with current air glut which Joy Business broke. And food producers in their farm plains share fears of a probable national food shortage. We'll tell you why. Welcome back to the marketplace. In our first story, government is looking to raise almost 20 billion cedis in bonds and treasury bills for the third quarter of this year. Now, a fundraising calendar released by the Finance Ministry was, however, quick to add that 15.8 billion of that amount would be rolling over existing bonds. Now, this should mean that it will be actually seeking a little over 2 billion cedis in fresh funds from investors, but with the country's debt stock at 236 million cedis at the end of March. This fundraising would obviously increase the country's total debt stock, which investors have described and analysts also have described as worrying. Well, joining me to discuss this is Courage Mate, who is an economist with Data Bank, on what this implies. So, Courage, 20 billion cedis in bonds and treasury bills for the third quarter, 2 billion cedis in fresh funds. Is this needful or just another borrowing spree?
Having me, Darrell, this is inevitable. But let's start by saying that about 89% of the total or gross issuance target is just to roll over existing debt. So the debt portfolio will not change because of the 89% component of the total issuance. However, the new borrowings will be about 2 billion cedis, which would be the addition to the debt portfolio in this particular window. But then again, if you contrast this particular calendar with the just ended calendar, you also notice that this new borrowing of about 2 billion cedis is about half of what the previous calendar targeted to do. So it means that in this new calendar, the borrowing is quite less compared to the previous calendar. Essentially, there's a signal that the government or the Treasury is sending to the market that, well, normally you have deficits that you have to fund through borrowings, right? But COVID-related issues has widened the deficits. Notwithstanding this widening of the deficits, government signal to the market is that they are intent on borrowing at a cost that would not jeopardize the debt sustainability outlook and the strategy. So you notice that they've done non-concessional financing from the IMF and World Bank. Then over the last couple of weeks or months, we've seen interest rates on the downturn, so that if they have to do market borrowings, it will be coming at a lower interest rate compared to the historical past or the maturing debts.
I guess you can anticipate my next question to do with our ballooning debt and what this implies.
Well, yes. So for as long as the deficit widens, and that means you have to spend more than the revenue you mobilize, even worsened by the exogenous shocks of COVID-19, and government will have to fund that deficit. So we shouldn't be surprised to see a surge, a steep rise in the debt portfolio. Now, careful movement must be made, because if you look at the end of last year, the fiscal data showed that the interest payment as a ratio of our total revenue increased by 4% to 37% of our total revenue. Now, with an increase in the debt stock expected this year further up, there is a risk of interest payment consuming further parts of our revenue. And that is why we must emphasize less expensive debts, interest-free and non-concessional debts going forward, so that even though the total debt stock will go up, because of COVID-related widening of the deficit, the cost structure of the debt will be firmly under grip.
Yeah, so that's what you propose, less expensive debt so that we can strike the balance amid the concerns that we are borrowing too much?
Yes, absolutely, because the debt accumulation, given the extraordinary times we find ourselves in, is inevitable. And it is happening around the world. So central banks are even funding government, and that is a debt. It's just that it's not an open market debt, right? So the debt accumulation is inevitable. How or at what cost did you accumulate this debt? This will be what investors and the market will be watching to determine your debt sustainability outlook.
And one other big economic news this week was inflation rate for the month of May hitting 11.3%. We are told that is the highest in the last 10 months, and just as we were being hopeful that the rate would improve as lockdown restrictions ease, we haven't seen that happen suddenly, Courage.
Yes, and again, let's blame COVID for some of these things. But then again, if you notice the jump we saw for May, it is a slower increase compared to the kind of increase we saw in April, because the April increase was 2.8% from 7.8 to 10.6. But the May increase was from 10.6 to 11.3, which is 0.7%. Now, it means that as the effect of the panic buying prior to the lockdown continues to die out of the system, we will see increases, again, because supply side disruptions persist, because of the fact that we are not yet in the harvest season. Right. Inflation will still go up for a couple more months, but at a slower rate before we start to head down when the harvest season comes through. So we should expect it to go up 1 or 2 more months, but at a slower rate, telling you that the pressures will be decaying over time.
And as we blame COVID and seeing that it's going to stay with us for quite a while, when do we expect things to normalize?
Well, if you look at the forecast that is being put out by, say, the World Bank, the IMF, and other agencies, a lot depends on how quickly COVID fades away, and to the extent that the expected recovery in 2021 is based on the assumptions that COVID fades away in the second half of this year. But then again, you want to be very cautious, because right now in the US, there are talks of a second wave or spikes in the virus infection rate. And then we also are experiencing our steep increases as far as the daily reportings are concerned. So it gives you reason to be cautious that even in the second half of this year, we might not see that fading away of COVID. Then a lot will then depend on how quickly we get a vaccine for this. So for me, I think we would have to deal with some of these things into latter part of 2020 or early 2021 by maybe mid-2021 for us to see things, improving when vaccine and other measures start to yield results.
All right, we'll keep being hopeful. Thank you very much indeed, Courage Mate. He is an economist with Data Bank. Now, moving on, food and vegetable farmers in the country who have been dealt a blow by the COVID-19 are concerned that their businesses would not flourish. Now, HortiFresh, which supports commercial food and vegetable sector development in West Africa, is currently conducting an impact assessment of the virus pandemic on the sector. It is hopeful to roll out a support program for those badly hit. We'll speak to the program's manager of HortiFresh in a moment. First, though, this report by Prince Appear on the impact of COVID-19 on the vegetable business.
We dry lettuce, spray onion, cabbage.
Meet Yabu Esiama, a vegetable farmer at Jinyase, a suburb of Kumasi. He has been farming a portion of this 28-acre vegetable farm for the past 12 years. But he says this year is his worst.
Because of COVID-19, I buy anything. I'm affected by the past. I can't be at 2% wise and best is 60% affected. Affected or can't say, the same as I said, Nanka first, Nanka Thomas schools, restaurants, hotels, and even a year for party for. They say, Nina, and across the down, but my case will be an Yerduma. The bus and I knew you do an idea, Stella and you do a band. And if I say, I said, my dear best 100 best. I was thinking I get 2 covers a week, Some customer banner just would delay be about 3 days and now 4 days, and some was baby. na say ama oni so amra back no na ama dodo no ase.
He and 28 other farmers who cultivate this land are unable to sell their produce because suppliers are reluctant to buy. Their main clients, schools, restaurants and hotels, are not operating due to COVID-19 restrictions.
Essence young Tonintino, Untimin 100 time price. And I want to mean Chinchas and the Jeff say, I didn't do any more. No more than you do an answer for our uncle into Sequino out of one bar. No one ever going to sit beyond so one tells a man who Jawa over to. Sisi Ankamin can say, I made the beginning who is example. And keep a time and I didn't mind, keep a bit more on the base of 30 cities. But you say, I did 10 cities who crown be more than I am. Because 5 cities, more crown, just over crown, say you crown. This is to.
This is a typical example of the impact of the COVID-19 on the vegetable production here in the country. This lettuce bed, we are told, has gone beyond its harvesting time, long overdue, which means in a matter of 3 days, if it is not harvested, will get spoiled because the leaves have begun folding towards each other, which the traders do not like. This means that all the investments made in this particular farm and others similar are going to go to waste.
Normally, need enka 2 acres ni nyina no ka me bon ho ka be 500 cedis ya at the end of month no ka manya cross enka mitiminya be 2000 but se see here dey wo bo ka be 600 kra na wo wia even 1000 kra na dey so obenya fi say wo dua mo no an say say.
The buyers attribute this to low patronage of vegetables on the market.
Masai to be at the market akoton.
Gifty Aboagye-Wiafe is a buyer.
Ya running my energy. Naka wait me to do. Never say me from the beer met me to beer. Akoton menya be a bear day, menya be a bear 30 Ghana, 3 million. And 20 basis another qua. What me at talk around be 800 and now 1 million. And I bet him out. He said,
April to June is the peak period for vegetable producers. Hotels and restaurants used to purchase the bulk of their supplies. Ifua Jimfua, CEO of Royal Lameta Hotel, for instance, used to spend about 50,000 on vegetables around this time.
Sometimes you can have a week-long program, and if you have a week-long program and you have a full house, then of course going to buy so many groceries. In a month, we buy over vegetables and provisions for the hotel. It hovers around 50,000 a month, or more than that.
The woes of the farmers has been compounded with the increase in prices of vegetable seeds to almost 100%. Because most of them are imported. Closure of the borders plays a major role. The vegetable industry is now struggling and on the verge of collapse. But if restrictions are more relaxed on the hospitality industry, events and schools, the situation could improve to address wastage in the system. Prince Apia reporting.
And we're getting an idea of just how much COVID-19 has affected the vegetable markets. Joining us to discuss this is Sheila Esibe-Yeboah, who is the program manager at HortiFresh. Glad you could join us this afternoon. I don't know if you saw bits of that report, but certainly COVID-19 having an impact on the domestic market. What are you hearing from the ground?
All right, thank you very much, and good afternoon to all your listeners. Certainly, COVID has affected all of us. We had to make amends in the way we do things. And, you know, the intensity, the level of impact and incidence wasn't known. So we've all been taken by surprise. And, you know, the vegetable sector is huge, largely informal. We are talking about the domestic market. It's largely informal, with the exception of some high-end markets. I saw your report on the hotels and some of the supermarket chains where they're able to structure their supply chains and keep them a bit formal. But a lot of our assessment is based on the experiences of these sector actors. And you know that very little data is available. So we don't have scientific evidence, but then bits and pieces from the sector. So a lot of learning has gone into the sector during this pandemic.
And just on just on the domestic market, but the export market too. Tell me about that experience as well.
Yeah, so the export market is, I would say, significantly impacted because it's not only the production bit, but then also what goes up. If you look at the exports, borders were closed. That affected how goods could move. We've been told by these exporters that their freight has gone up by up to 50%. Volumes had to decrease by about 30%, and this is because of logistical challenges. Thanks to the management of AGPC and Swissport, that ensured that there was a dedicated cargo flight to get things moving. Even that, it was just once a week. And so volumes had to be slashed by up to 60%. The highlights, though, which is quite interesting, is the demand increased. We are told demand has gone up by anywhere between 50 to 100%. And this is because of the gap that has been left by the Latin American markets. They were the major, I would say, suppliers of some of these export vegetables that we send. And because of the effect of COVID in those countries, Ghana, or most of the international markets, are looking to Africa, and for that matter, Ghana. And so I think it's high time we take advantage of that and try to tap into that market, not only to just meet the demand gap, but then also hopefully sustain those markets.
Okay, and so I'm told that you have conducted, or you are conducting, an impact assessment, and that will inform what kind of assistance you can give to farmers and others in the value chain. Where are you at with that?
It's still ongoing. It's still ongoing. We are still on it because, like I said, data is not readily available in one piece. So you have to pick it from real sector actors who are getting their fingers burned on a daily basis. So we had many things. If you look at supply was okay. But then in the beginning, because of the perceived, and this is about the domestic market in Ghana, because of the perceived lockdown or pending lockdown, people panicked. There was panic buying. And also, we hear from the transporters that they had a hell of a time on the road. So most of them wouldn't want to go ahead and bring produce and lose out. So most of the produce were left at the farm gates, and then prices also were affected here in some of the urban markets. Whenever that happens, you know that demand goes up because there's a perceived scarcity. And it affects everything. Also, they tell us that I think a lot of people had dwindling cash flows, which is being experienced by most of the job cuts. And so people would not ordinarily purchase in the volumes that they think they would want to have, but then strictly on what they need. And so that also affected the market a bit.
Great. Tell you what, Sheila, when you could conclude your assessment, we would have a conversation again as to your findings and what next in terms of support for the vegetable farmers. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the marketplace.
Thank you.
All right, so let's stay with the agri sector. And the National Buffer Stock Company says Cabinet is calling on both local and international companies to support the poultry value chain, especially processing eggs into powder. Odilia Ntiamwa spoke to the CEO of the National Buffer Stock Company, Abdul-Wahab Hanan Alutuba, who says they will be willing to buy the powder from producers and store.
I know that when it comes to a national buffer stock, it may not necessarily be just skewed towards storage of food in relation to just grains. There was a recent egg glut. It's still persisting. How do we hope to be able to take advantage of such gluts and store, probably process and store some of these items?
Yeah, it's a major concern to to us all. This issue has been discussed at cabinet. You know, the COVID-19 has really exposed a lot of things. Today, second cycle institutions have been closed down and some other institutions. And that has contributed greatly to the glut of eggs that we see, you understand, because they were relying, because when you look at buffer stock, we are responsible for the feeding component of the Free Senior High School. So we are supplying them with 18 non-perishable food items. So perishable items like egg, meat, and other fruits and vegetables, those ones are procured by the schools on a daily basis because a certain percentage of the feeding component is sent back to the schools so that they will procure the food items on a daily, the perishable food items on a daily basis. So should we get a processing company that can actually process or increase the shelf life of these food items, then we can deal with it, sign an MOU with that company and let the company develop the capacity to supply nationwide of this, so that farmers that produces egg, poultry farm that produces egg will supply to the company and the company will process it and then keep it. So we are getting there and calling on everyone to come on board. But today, we are very happy to tell Ghanaians that we are supplying 100% Ghana rice to all the second cycle institutions. Acceptability, fantastic. You take foreign rice or imported rice to Labone Secondary School, they will turn you down because we have been able to change the taste and preference of the student. It's one of our greatest achievement and target that we have made. So we are still working to fine-tune the system, and then our major concern now is to have these warehouses operational so that we can, because even if buffer stock is even going to borrow, you borrow against your space.
Great stuff. At least we are making headway with addressing the situation there with the egg glut. That's it for the marketplace. Thanks for watching.